Welcome back to All for United WFC. England is through again, eh? Who would have thought? That was a cracking game yesterday, to be fair, from England and Spain. We've got so much to get through. We'll try and cover this in under the hour, like we always do, because there's another quarterfinal tonight that we all want to go and watch. So we'll try and get through it all under an hour. We're going to shape this up a little bit differently today, because I want to actually come to yourself, Charlie. Before we get into the actual game itself, I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of pre-match atmosphere and the atmosphere throughout the game. And just what it was like, really, just being there and seeing that moment. Obviously, you've seen quite a few big moments in this tournament so far. But what was it like actually being there last night?
It was easily the best atmosphere at any game I've been to so far. And there's been some really good atmospheres at non-England games. They've always been really good. But last night was incredible. Best one ever. It just felt like any other football game when it's hanging on a bit of a knife edge and it really matters. Not a Mexican wave in sight, which I know Barry will be disappointed about, but it's because it wasn't like the carnival atmosphere of like, oh, you're 6-0 ahead at half time, or you're playing Northern Ireland, you might get a cricket score. It really, really mattered, and you could feel it in moments when like there was actual player chants. So Tooney was a big fan favourite. She was getting chants. Beth Mead was getting chants. There were real audible responses when things weren't going our way with the referee. Because Spain played her really well, the referee really well for a while, I think. And the reaction from the crowd when decisions weren't going for England was really negative. When Spain were going down easily, really negative responses, which you just hadn't had. And it's because all of a sudden, it wasn't just, oh, we're just going to have a fun time and watch England walk all over someone. They're playing the tournament favourites. Spain were the favourites at the time. And I think we'd probably been sort of lured into a false sense of security that this might be a 3-0 or a 4-0 because Spain hadn't been playing too well and England had just been rolling everyone over. But then it was really close and Spain played brilliantly, and that had a massive impact on the atmosphere. And that last 10 minutes of extra time was really tough, like edge of your seat stuff from everybody. Really, really intense. But like I said, brilliant. And I think a better advert for women's football than the atmosphere we've had maybe earlier in the tournament. This was a better advert because I think people who don't normally go realised, oh my, like this is what you get out of it. Like these really intense highs and the stress and the relief of it. You had that in this game, which I think in the other England games you perhaps hadn't.
Yeah, 100%. I really do agree with that. I think it does the game better when you've got these kind of close games. And like you said, I think Spain being as good as they were, I was one of those people. I thought England would steamroll them just because of Spain in the tournament so far. They weren't convincing at all. And yesterday, they really turned up. Before we get into Andy and Steve's thoughts on the game, and we'll really dive into this, Charlie sent a couple of little clips over, which I am going to play. You're going to get to see Charlie's reaction at full time as well, which actually. I'll play the videos. First, you're going to see the Stanway goal celebrations, and you're going to see a little clip from full time as well. I was half expecting you trying to run on the pitch then after.
Even watching that back there, I was like, oh, that was so amazing.
It did look at all the videos that have come out in the last 24 hours, I think have been fantastic and things like that. I'm sure we're going to get a few more goosebumps as we talk about the Tooney goal a little bit later on, but we're going to do this in kind of chronological order as the game went on. And I'll come to you first, Andy, on this. We had a little bit of a chat about this backstage. Starting 11, we'll start there because that's what obviously always comes out first. Surprised, happy, it's been unchanged throughout. Sarina's been very confident that this is her team. These are the subs. How do you kind of feel about that? Were you kind of I don't know what the word is, optimistic, nervous, excited when you saw that lineup again?
I think a lot was made beforehand about how she doesn't rotate. So it was expected. It would have been a shock if there would have been a change. I think with the way the groups went, it's tough to judge who deserves to start, because when you're winning so convincingly, in some ways you're saying that team's got to start. Why would you change that? In other ways, you're saying, one of the victories was against tournament debutants. How can you judge the quality of the starting lineup on that game? Should they have rotated in that game and then saved that first choice 11 for this one? But they're doing the job. They've not conceded a goal. I don't think you could argue with any starting lineup, to be honest. I think whichever 11 start, it's a fair shout. I think people are making a big thing about she's a meticulous planner, but if you start the same 11 every game, is that a meticulous plan? Or is that this is my best team, this is what's going to play? So I'm not sure about the meticulous planning comments that come out about it, but it's the same all the time and it's working. So would you argue with the same again next time?
It's a fair comment. And Steve, same question to yourself. I think someone actually put in the comments, I can't remember, it might have been on Saturday's match reaction show that we did. I think somebody said, well, I can't remember the analogy now. I said I was going to write it down. It was something like, if the wheels are turning, don't throw a spanner in it, or something like that. I think was the analogy. I can't remember exactly what it was. But Steve, before we get into the game itself, and just your kind of initial thoughts on the lineup when you saw it come out.
Yeah, it was to be expected, to be honest with you, mate. And like I say, it's working, but I also agree with some of the things of it's actually looking better when the substitutions are made. So you can see why people are asking for it to be shaken up a little bit. That top line, I don't think the top two have worked through Kirby and Ellen White. We're getting more energy when Russo and Toone are coming in, so you can understand why people are saying they should be starting, but it's working. We found our way through, so yeah, fair play to her, but a problem as well is some of these girls are going to need minutes in the legs. You're coming down to these two crunch games now, Sweden and Germany, they're not going to be, I think, that way, but they're going to be harder games, and you need that full fitness out of the squad, and you're starting to get, was that 4 games in a row now? A lot of them playing the 90 minutes. Will it work? I don't know.
You said Sweden and Germany there. Do you know something we don't? Are you in league with Charlie on this predictions league? Are you trying to, the scores before they're even happening? But no, I think you are right. We were chatting before. I think that is probably the run now we're expecting, unless something massive happens, which, to be fair, it could well do with all of Sweden's COVID cases and a couple of injuries they've got over there. Could be a shock on tomorrow night. Let's get into the game then. Charlie, I'll throw it around to you first, and then let's all have a nice little chat about the Spain threat down the wings, and obviously where the goal came from. It was exactly what me and Ashley were chatting on Saturday in the match reaction. The one place England are vulnerable down the wing, stopping the cross on the floor, and that's exactly where the goal came from, particularly on Daily's side. So Charlie, just first for yourself, and Spain's kind of threat, and are you worried at all that something that we all highlighted, the space in between the fullbacks, is something that Spain exploited very well?
What was really interesting about watching Spain was they were pressing in such a way that the out ball from Williamson and Millie Bright, it always had to go to Lauren Hemp. So they pressed in such a way that it couldn't get out to Walsh because they were doubling up on her, and it couldn't get out to Beth Mead, who's up until this point has probably been player of the tournament. So it just couldn't get there. And then a lot of the time, Hemp was having to receive the ball with her back to goal, which is ideal as a defender because Honor was dealing so well with her. You don't want Hemp facing up and receiving the ball over her shoulder and running at you. You want it with your back. You want her with her back to goal. So you could see that was happening, and England just couldn't find a way out. And then they switched them. So Sarina switched Mead and Hemp. And then we thought, oh, they're going to try Mead that side. But then they just kept persisting in, it would just still kept going to Hemp every time. So it was a bit of a weird setup. And it's the thing with the fullbacks as well, with Daly and Bronze, it's a really attacking defensive line, isn't it? So you're relying on Williamson and Bright to do the dog's body work, which they did again last night brilliantly. And Bronze and Daly can just bomb on. But the only difference is they were playing a world-class team this time. And I think when you're playing opposition and you're anticipating that your team are going to have the ball a lot, you can probably get away with playing someone out of position at fullback when you anticipate you're going to be on top. But we weren't on top against Spain. They're going to have a lot more of the ball. And I think that's what left Rachel Daly exposed, because you could see, like, defence is like a really nuanced position. It's not, you can't just throw one in there willy-nilly and hope for the best. And you could see there were times when she came for the ball where it looked like, she should be holding her position here. She should be trying to keep them, sort of shuffle them out or hustle them out. And there were times when she didn't close down, and you think probably someone who's a specialist in that position, like maybe a Greenwood or a Stokes, would have known to make those decisions. And it's not because Daly's not a good footballer. We've got to remember she's playing out of position every game. That's what's happening. And she was also on a side with Hemp, and Hemp just wasn't tracking back. She was just staying up at the halfway line, which also then when Daly made the wrong decision, you've then got Williamson having to come across, which then leaves Millie Bright exposed. So they were kind of having to mop up a bit that catalogue of issues there were on that left-hand side. But Spain played that brilliantly. They were pressing, so we just kept having to go that way, and we didn't seem to be able to find a way around it.
I think you know what you're getting with Spain, whether it's men or women, kids, adults, whatever. When you're playing against a Spanish team, you know that they're going to have a good chance of controlling the game. And that's something England haven't faced in this tournament so far. People expected a lot from Norway. Whether we were good enough or they were bad enough, whatever the reason for that was, the challenge wasn't there. So this was a first. This was almost the start of the tournament after what we mostly expected in the group stages. So I think weathering the storm was probably a good way of describing the first half, and we've seen it from United teams over the years. Even under Fergie, the best United teams going into Europe sometimes just had to stay in the game long enough to have the energy near the end to provide a bit of class. And I think that's something that the substitutes do. And that might be something you lose if you start changing the starting lineup. I mean, I'm perfectly happy for United's players to rip it up on the European stage, but still not play a full 90 minutes and come back fresh and buzzing after a tournament. But from an England perspective, you could switch it up. If it doesn't work, then you're looking at your bench and thinking, right, what now? Whereas we know at 60 minutes, we're getting some fresh legs, hungry players who can threaten anybody. So I think the fact that we held on at 1-0 and didn't go 2 down, because 2 down would have been a mountain to climb. I think keeping one goal in it and holding on for that long and knowing that you've got the firepower to come on, who, because they didn't start in the last game, because they didn't change it up, they've played, 3 lots of 30 minutes? So they're ready to come on for the last half hour, which became an hour, still fresh, still hungry, and not just wanting to prove the points, but absolutely proving what they can do.
I think Caldente was class yesterday, especially the first 25 minutes, made quite a lot of openings for Spain. And like Charlie said, we weren't getting that coverage from Hemp, so fullbacks were a little bit exposed. A couple of times she switched wings with Beth Mead, and a couple of times Lucy Vaughan's got exposed because she likes to play a little bit higher up. She kind of got caught in a couple of 2-on-1s and looked a little bit dodgy down that side. So, I understand the Rachel Daly thing, she was out of her depth, but it even exposed Lucy Vaughan, who people are still talking about as one of the best fullbacks in the world. But of all the chances they created, I don't actually think they threatened Mary Earps. She made a couple of saves, but they were quite simple. She made them look quite simple. Her footwork recently has got so much better. She's covering the goal and she's just making simple catches and kind of slowing the game down as well. Willing to just lie on the ball for a couple of seconds, let the girls get back into shape, try and figure out what we're going to do into the next wave. And yeah, it was a lot of Spain for the first 25 minutes, but I don't think it was as edgy as it could have been, and that's probably because of who Spain are missing. I think if Pateas is there, that's a different story.
Yeah, I agree with that. Oh, go on, Charlie.
Well, I was going to say, I probably agree with Steve there. Like, Spain had a lot of the ball, but when you were there as well, it didn't feel like it was like batten down the hatches and they were knocking on the door the whole time. We kind of kept them. I think Brighton Williamson did a really good job of keeping them at bay. But yeah, it didn't feel like England were under relentless attack. What the bigger worry wasn't sure where our goal was going to come from. And that's where the substitutes, I just didn't feel like the Spanish centre-backs were struggling at all, had anything to think about until Russo came on. And I promise I would say that whether I was a Man United fan or not, but they had no issues to deal with. None at all. It was dead easy for them. And then she comes on, 3 of them marking her, and she still wins the header. She just bullied them, and she made them have to do things. And I was also a little bit surprised at England's lack of physicality with Spain at the start as well. Spain were being quite physical and niggly fouls and getting away with it. And we were just sort of getting a bit stroppy about it, not really. Like the referee was letting them get away with it. So just play them at their game, just do that as well, which I think we then did really well later on. But then I think we brought on some players, like we watched Toone all season. We know what she's like. She's that sort of player as well. She'll come in and she'll have a bit of a kick out and a bit of a niggle and catch the heels. And that's what we were missing a little bit as well. But I think the Spanish coach, I don't get him. I think he's indecisive. Like we talk about Sarina not changing anything. He changes his team constantly, all the time. Like it's like he doesn't trust them in any way whatsoever. So I think part of it was I would be looking at him as well.
I was just going to say, it's like 2 high-pressing teams last night, to be fair to them, and you're going to get those amount of fouls. I had a look at just before we came on. I think it was 18, 17.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fouls just because of the tempo was being played at for pressing. You're going to get that, but Spain did play it very well, to be fair to them.
It felt to me very much like it. Sorry, Andy, you wanted to jump in on that point?
I'll just add into the comments on Russo. I think even with the assist, she got her head to it. It bounced off a defender into Toone's path. But regardless of that, if Russo isn't there, that doesn't happen. Like Charlie said, they were doubling up on her because they know how much of a threat she is. They know how physical she is. She's hungry. She's a beast when she's chasing the ball. You know, she wants it and she's going to get it. And even if it's not a clean touch, she got her head to it, and that is what made it bounce. You get a bit of luck, but we earned that luck with Russo's hunger for the ball.
But the thing is, like her and Toone come on, and all of a sudden, like England just seem to be wanting to play down the wings all the time, which as a concept is fine when you've got Hemp and Mead. Like, why not? Like, they've been brilliant, but nothing was going down the middle. So Kirby was almost like, what's the point in her? Because she, like, you forgot she played it, and not entirely through her fault, but there was just no service to her. And she wasn't getting close enough. Like when Hemp was struggling, they weren't getting close enough to her to offer support to Hemp either. And then Toone and Russo come on, and all of a sudden there's an option down the middle now. There's something else that we can do to mix it up a little bit. So it made us less one-dimensional.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. There's been a lot of different comments and a lot of points made in the last kind of 10 minutes. So I don't really know where to pick up on, but I know where I'm gonna head to in a second. But yeah, I think there's a few comments there talking about Spain's kind of way of playing and the kind of tactical fouls and things like that. I liked it. I liked watching both teams in the first half because it felt very much. I think for me, and you could look at it slightly negative, but it's the way I kind of feel about it. When I was watching England in the group stage, I was kind of feeling this just feels a bit too easy and a bit like festival-like. I've said that a lot, that it felt very, I don't know, I wanted a proper tight game, and that's obviously what we saw, and I think that was fantastic. And, not going to dive into it too much, but the yellow card that the Spanish girl got towards the end, that's I don't know what she got, but I know she kicked the water things over, but come on. Like, if anyone who's watched Jose Mourinho, that's not a bookable offence. But another United player I do want to talk about before we look at the goals itself, talking about Mary Earps here, this is a brilliant kind of little segue into it. The save from Mary Earps at 65 minutes. I've actually got the stills I tweeted out earlier. So the cross, I'm going to call it a cross because that's what I think. Cross/shot. It's kind of looping across, and obviously pushes that over. And credit to Millie Bright as well, actually, after that, for stopping the rebound as well, because Earps pulls off the first initial save, but Millie Bright's also got to recover and block it as well. What I liked from this was, me and Andy were talking about this before we went live. Mary Earps is clearly expecting the cross. She takes a little, if you watch the replay back, she takes a little step forward and then goes, oh, that's coming over my head. So I have to take the step back, and that's where you see the reach. Fair play to, I think it's a cracking save. And like I put on Twitter earlier, I don't think England, and I think Andy, you said this, I don't think England come back if that goes in. If Spain go 2 up, I think that's probably game done. But just anyone who wants to jump on that in terms of Mary Earps' performance, because this is the first time really we've seen her been tested. I know it wasn't, she wasn't peppered with shots all game, but the one save she had to make, she made it.
like I said earlier on, mate, she quite comfortable in the early stages, making the saves look comfortable at least, and that save was absolutely stunning. That's down to her footwork, which has improved incredibly over the last year. I think about 18 months ago, that's going in. No offence to her, but she wasn't covering her line at all. Lobbed a couple of times. You know, she's definitely up to a game. She deserves to be there. And yeah, solid performance from her. You know, I think as a goalkeeper, you want to be making those saves. You want to be showing that you're that good, but you also don't want to be facing 25, 30 shots a game because you're going to concede one or two. So I think she had pretty much a perfect game last night.
That is almost sorry, just very quickly,
go on,
Charlie.
you go for it, Connor.
No, that was what you said there is almost like word for word what John has literally just wrote out as well there. You know, talking that 2 years ago, you know, that probably goes in, and also what John Commode is also saying. That's exactly what I said to Andy backstage. That it reminded me of the David Seaman save, where kind of hooking it back from behind her. But sorry, go on, Charlie.
I can't remember now. I was just sort of echoing it really and saying like the two, she made a really good save, didn't she, against Austria in the first game, and then this one. They've both relied on her footwork being top notch, which felt like before the Euros was the thing that people were picking at to decide whether she should actually be playing, even though she clearly was the number one. But also, I think a sign of a really good goalkeeper is when you don't have to do that much at certain points, and then all of a sudden you're expected to do something quite important, and that's what she did. And I also like the fact that she like clawed it out. It was like dead strong wrist, didn't she? Just batted it away. But obviously, what was equally as important, and obviously Millie Bright got player of the match, which she deserved. She's deserved that in multiple games, I think. Was her anticipating that right, the goalkeeper could get this here. I need to be in to sweep it away, and I think that just showed a really good understanding and good anticipation from her as well. But brilliant for Mary. And I think you're right when you say England don't come back from that. At that point, was it about 75th minute, something like that?
That's late 60s, I think it was.
Something like that. Probably don't come back from that. So I think that was critical. And I think in Sarina's post-match press conference, she's asked about it. And she does also reiterate how important that is. And I think she's one of the undroppables, isn't she? Like for Sarina, she's like really relies on her and trusts her. So I think that was brilliant last night.
Yeah, we've had the comments about goalkeepers needing to focus when they've not got much to do. We've talked about Mary's improvement over the last few years. So something I'll comment on is since Mary's arrived at United, even in the earlier days when she wasn't as convincing, one thing I always liked about her, which we missed during lockdown and behind closed doors games, because you don't see it on TV on the pitch, but she's always had that swagger of confidence, you know, not arrogance, but real confidence. And that's something that I always want to see in United players. And that's something that she's always showed. The way she holds herself, it's always been one of confidence and I'm in the right place. I deserve to be here. I'm going to do it. I think that's something that has driven her to that number one spot and ultimately to the focus and concentration that's needed to pull something off when you've been asked very little of beforehand.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with all the comments made there. Like I said, I think it is a cracking serve. And like I said, when you get further deep into the tournament, as we all know, you know, you're going to have these tests. You know, if we play Sweden in the next round, she's going to have those tests again. You know, she's going to need to pull off probably a couple of those saves. And certainly if we get to the final and Germany are in there, she's going to have to make a few of those saves, most definitely, to keep them out. Right, we're 25 minutes in, or 24 minutes in, and we've got to probably the best part of the game, I think, particularly as United fans. Russo and Tooney came on. Yet again, the game changes for England. It's been briefly spoken about, but I'll come to each of you. In fact, Charlie, I want to come to you first on it, but ask you in terms of what that was like in the stadium, because it felt very much on TV. That's the first time that I've seen a game like that, where you have it, where it's a full stadium. And I think I tweeted Shane this about half an hour ago. The little silence you get just before the ball goes in, it's almost like the go on, silence, then the kind of roar of the crowd. It's the first time I've seen that, I think, all tournament. And it felt very much like a proper atmosphere. So what did you think on that? Because of the Tooney goal, but also the kind of reaction and atmosphere after that? You're on mute, by the way.
Give me more thinking time. The reaction was incredible. Like I said, it's that relief, isn't it? It's that one of those emotions that you get, like when you're there, like this is why people watch football. This is why people watch live sport, for that moment when that happens. And I thought what I liked is for that attack, obviously, I like some people moaning, going, "Oh, the plan B was to throw Millie Bright up front." It worked. It doesn't matter. Like, she occupied some defenders, didn't she? It was the fact there was Millie Bright in there. There was Russo, and Ella Toone was following it up, and those sorts of things hadn't been happening. Like, she was anticipating it, and if you look at a run, she finds a bit of space over the shoulder of the defender, and it was just brilliant. Like, you knew when Russo knocked it down, you knew it was going in, and that's when it went a bit quiet, and then it was phenomenal. It was just, everyone went absolutely wild, and then the big Tooney chant started, which was brilliant. But do you know what was horrible is all the Spanish players, that obviously that Spanish player pretended that she'd been injured when she hadn't. It was that VAR has such good things, but that moment afterwards was horrendous, because it felt like they showed the replays on the screen, which is quite nice. You're like, nothing's gone wrong here. What are they moaning about? But they're all gesticulating and making a fuss. And there's like little kids around, like, what's going on? Like, I don't know what's going on. And then obviously then you find out, right, actually there's nothing wrong with it. And you got the second reaction as well. But after that moment, the crowd were just engrossed. That was it. And you could feel it. Like, you know, they talk about like the 12th man, like sucking the ball into the net for the next goal. Like, that's what it felt like. And the belief completely changed. Like, I will say, I thought, surely England, who have been really ruthless, can't not score, surely. And once they did, Spain just like capitulated. That was it. Like, they couldn't cope with anything. They lost their heads. The manager got a yellow card. The sub goalkeeper got a yellow card. They were moaning about everything. And you just saw like that complete switch in momentum happened in that moment. And Spain just crumbled, I think. And I think from that point onwards, there was only really one winner. And I'm so glad it was Tooney. I just wish she'd done the knee slide at my end. That's all I wished. But it was amazing. The fella next to me, it was like, it's the first game I've come to. Never been to a women's football game. What do they need to do? And I was like, they need to bring Ella Toone on. That's what they need to do now. And then when she scored, he lost his head. Like, pretty much picked me up. So it was really, really good, brilliant. And what an advert! Like, the best possible advert for women's football is that emotion coming out. Loved it.
100%.
Take that over an 8. I'd take that over last night. Take that over an 8-0 win. And she was wearing the 20. She came on as a sub and she scored. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? How amazing.
I fully agree. And just very quickly, Andy, before you jump in on Tooney's goal there, the one point that you mentioned, you're talking about the aftermath, the kind of the Spanish players were around. I liked it because for me, like I said, it felt very much like a proper get this. Like, I think, Charlie, you said this on the channel a few times. The game really meant something. They're not just there to pick up, oh, we played in a Euros tournament. They're there. They need to win. And it really felt like that. The Spanish players kicking off. I loved it. I was like, go on. Like, let's see some real fight here, because I think you saw that in Tooney's celebration. You can see the kind of passion in her face, and rightly so. And I thought, like you said, the crowd, and even after that, from kickoff, you could hear it on the TV. The crowd from kickoff, then were really pushing the team on. I mean, I think that place would have fell apart if there had been a goal in, before full time. But no, 100%. And so, Andy, just over to yourself in terms of Tooney's goal, because as we said, there are 2 United girls coming on, changing the game, and it was a nice finish in the end.
Yeah, and when I saw Russo was coming on at first, it was like, hang on, that's not Toone next to her. They come on together. Doesn't she know this? The comments around the intensity of the feeling of the equaliser. There's so much. There's people are so keen to talk about how good women's football is that sometimes it's overstated, and it doesn't need to be, but it happens a lot. Things are great rather than good. Things are world class rather than great. And it frustrates me because it doesn't need to be done. And last night showed that, talk about it on its own merit, look at what it means, look at what happens, look at the reactions to it. No Mexican waves, just intense, the relief of the goal as much as the enjoyment. And that's the point where it's not, look at women's football, it's, look, this is football. And that's what football is. Like Charlie said, that's much better than an 8-0 win. Because as great as an 8-0 win looks, once the second one goes in, it's like, yeah, comfortable. The third one goes in, oh, nice. And then it's just, oh, another one, right? Yeah, cool. You barely even celebrate. But there's so much more to enjoy in a close encounter where you're not sure if it's going to happen. It's through watching United over the years and the decades of success. When we expected to win, was enjoyable to see the trophies, but kind of the worst atmosphere. Hope breeds a much better atmosphere than expectation. And that's where you get to these later stages. And I've no doubt that with the success of this tournament so far, in years to come, the groups will be stronger. There'll be more of that kind of game throughout rather than just when you get to the latter stages, because that's the way it's going. And the numbers that I've watched this time show that the support is there, and it's going to improve. It can't do anything other than grow throughout Europe, throughout the world, and we'll get this kind of intensity more often. And it will be just football rather than look how good women's football is becoming, because it's up there. That the atmosphere that you could see through the screen last night, never mind being there. I mean, it was obvious that it was incredible, and that's what football needs. That's what football is.
I think for that equaliser, like Charlie touched on earlier, with Millie Bright going up top, Tooney was really clever on that goal, and the fact she goes to the back post, all the defenders get sucked in. They go in. Millie Bright, Alessia Russo, balls in the air. Tooney then makes that decision to run back around to the front post and just gets that little gap where the defenders have left it. Ball falls down to her. It's really, really clever idea from Ella Toone, and she's got a reward for it. So fair play to her.
So I was on mute myself then. No, I agree with everything that's been said there. I think, like I said, for me, as a selfish United fan, I'm glad that obviously it didn't help that it was an ex-City and Stanway, or recently ex-City. Don't come at me saying Tooney, but obviously they got the winner. But just on Tooney's goal, yeah, I think you're right as well. It is clever play because, yes, it's not a world-class finish, but it's not an easy finish. But you've got to be in that position in the first place to put it in. England weren't in those positions all game. And I think you are right, Charlie. I think you said earlier that probably doesn't happen if Russo's not on the pitch in the first place. Because are you going to get that type of, I don't know the way of describing it, kind of knockdown if Ellen White potentially is on the pitch, or if you've got somebody else playing up there? Those two having the know-how of working together, you'd get it if Kirby and England were on the same pitch, and obviously, things like that. The kind of connections of playing with each other all season. Russo would have known where Ella was going to be, kind of nearby. So, yeah, that was fantastic. And we'll move on to the second goal then. Obviously, that turned out to be the winner. I mean, what a strike this was. And Charlie, I'll let you lead off on this one. Georgia Stanway, it was another goal for her, and this one was an absolute cracker.
Yeah, well, what helped with that, obviously, with Spain's having a bit of a mare, and they sort of started dropping off. And then, whereas they'd been sort of closing down Keira Walsh and Stanway and doubling up and really pressing, they just stopped doing it. And then all of a sudden, Keira Walsh had an extra couple of yards of space. And then for the goal, when Stanway was like ploughing forwards with it, I just turned to my brother and was like, they're stepping off here. They're running backwards. Like, they're running backwards. No one's going to do anything. And I know, like, we've vilified her as Man United fans, but we know Georgia Stanway, you don't want her on the edge of the 18-yard box with that ball at her feet. You don't, particularly when she's moving with it. And it was incredible. Like, it felt like she was going to score. They were just letting her go and go and go. And I think, Mappy Leon also turned away from it, like turned her back on it. And it wasn't like right in a corner or anything, but the power with which she hit that, it was in the back of the net before the goalkeeper had responded once the ball went past her. She hit it that hard. And then obviously the metaphorical roof did come off the stadium, and that was it. Spain were just done. But yeah, what like a stereotypical old school England win in like a tournament where like they're sort of struggling through, really not sort of making much of anything. A scruffy hoof the ball in, headed, just knock it in, luckily, and then an absolute rocket from outside the box. How many times have we seen that sort of thing from England? But again, brilliant. And by that point in the game, deserved. I know lots of people will say, "Oh, Spain were on top for the first half of the normal time." Yes, they were. But once England scored that first goal, 40 odd minutes, it was all England. But I love a goal like that. Love a worldie. So yeah, brilliant. And what the game deserved as well. Phenomenal. I just couldn't believe how Spain were not doing anything.
Interesting stat for you. That was the only shot England had in extra time, according to this. Spain had 6. And 70% of the ball almost.
But did nothing. Like that's that thing, isn't it? Yes, you can have the ball if you're in front of us knocking it about, no problem. But yeah, just incredible. What an incredible goal. I'm glad I was there.
Yeah, and like Charlie says about the Spanish defenders were backing off her. And you can watch a goal and say, well, she's got loads of space. That was made easy. But that was made easy because of the momentum. Spain were backing off because they were rattled. They'd had their moment. They scored a goal, but only one. And then since the equaliser, like Charlie says, it was all England. And that was that wasn't a thank you Spain for letting us through. That was Spain were under pressure and were rattled. The game plan had gone. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to cope with the subs that came on. That was England's second half and extra time dominance and pressure, and no doubt the atmosphere in the stadium as well. The feeling was there that once England scored the equaliser, you didn't think anything other than it's coming. And I think that's credit to England as well, that they forced that kind of standoffishness from Spain that is uncharacteristic.
I thought you were going to go the full way and say the 3-word phrase, then it's coming. I'm not going to finish that sentence off because I'm not saying it unless England win it. And I've already said that I'll have to say it on this channel, but there we are. Steve, over to yourself and for the Stanway goal and your kind of thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, I think they've pretty much covered it really well there, to be fair. It's just momentum of England, and you don't give Georgia Stanway that kind of space. What the defenders were thinking, backing half of her, it's just a bit of poor defending, really, and fair play to her. She made them pay for it. Just like Charlie said about ending, it was all with England, and again, I think what did they say about Leslie Busto getting the headers and whatnot? She actually did some really good hold-up play after we got the second goal, and she's that strong and put the ball into her, and there's 2 or 3 players around her, and she keeps the ball and draws her fouls. So there's some really good game management after we've gone 2-1 up.
Yeah, thanks. I've asked Connor to pop that up from Marty, just because I completely agree with that. I completely agree. Because when, like last night, when England got the equaliser, you could then see the difference between, and obviously she's got her faults, and like I was watching it going, why is she not changing it now? Why is she not changing it now? Like you feel like there needs to be more happening than there is. But you saw the difference there between Spain having like a good coach and England having an elite coach. Because she made the subtle change of Millie Bright that needed to happen to make that goal, to help make that goal. Because she did the same thing with her in the Arnold Clark Cup, didn't she, against Germany? We need to win this now. Up you go, be a nuisance. And it might seem like there's not much to it, but it made the difference. So I just wanted to bring that up because I completely agree with that. I think you can see the difference between England having an elite manager and then just having a manager. And I think that's the big difference. This same squad with Phil Neville don't win that game. They don't win that game last night.
It's a fair shout. It was something I was going to bring up after the next round, to be fair, because I'd expect England to get to the final now. But yeah, that was on my list for the next one, I think, talking about Sarina, because I think we are seeing the difference in the play you mentioned there. Millie Bright, I think Sang was talking about it earlier, that we're now seeing the player that Millie Bright is. And I think, to me, she's alongside, you talking the United girls and Beth Mead, potentially. Millie Bright has been one of the best players in this tournament, not just for England, I think just in general. Kind of at centre half, her passing range for me is something else that you don't really see. And obviously, just flicking it over to what I'd compare it to in the men's side, you're looking at the likes of John Terry, I think, in that sense, the kind of the little chips just past the midfield and to the wire players and things like that from centre half. It's very there. So I'm going to ask this question. I asked this backstage, and Charlie just kind of went off on a little rant. So I'm just going to ask it and let her go for it. That there's a little bit of a narrative out there that maybe England have got away with one here. That they've got over a hurdle, potentially a small one, but they may have got away with it. And on the balance of the game, Spain did have some chances. They were controlling the ball well, pressed really well. 2 questions, really, I guess, off the back of that. One, have England got away with it? And do England need to drastically improve in order to get through to the next round? Charlie, I'll let you start on that one.
Right. What I would say is it's Spain that England were playing. So tournament favourites. Okay, it's not like Mickey Mouse Holiday Camp Club that not playing a team that's just come up to make the numbers. Like, these are the tournament favourites. And I know they're without Proteas, and I know they haven't got Jenny Hermoso. I get that. But football is a team game, and they are littered with world-class players. And we saw from their bench, like, they brought players on in extra time. I thought, crikey, why weren't you playing from the start? Like, you're phenomenal. So I just feel like we need to look at this for what it is. They beat the tournament favourites. No one's come from behind to beat Spain in a competitive game, certainly in about 5 years. I think it was like Brazil was the last team that did it. And in the context of this, under immense pressure and expectation, they did it. Now, we've said before, like, Spain had a lot of the ball and were on top in the sense that they had possession. But England weren't massively uncomfortable for 84 minutes until they scored. Because it's like Man United women, how many times were they on top in games and didn't win? Like last season, like, I'd have taken them playing like England and winning those games. Like, you wouldn't be going, oh, I'd rather they played better and didn't win. Like, they dealt with it really well. The manager made the changes that needed to be made, and they won the game of football. And it's not how much possession you have that wins you a game of football. It's who scores the most goals. When England scored the most goals. So I think sometimes, particularly in this country, mostly because I don't watch it in other countries, obviously, so I don't really know. But even when things are going really well, people can still look for, like, what's the really negative thing here? What's the negative thing we can pick up on? They've just knocked the tournament favourites out. That's what's just happened, in really exciting fashion. So yes, there were times when it was a bit squeaky bum, and there were times when Spain were better, but there were also long periods when England were better. So I just think we need to keep it into perspective and not look at the positives rather than just, oh, they've just got away with it here. That implies that England didn't do anything to deserve to win. That's just how I would feel that sounds. And I think England played a good game.
Yeah, we'd all love to be the best team for 90 minutes every game we play, but it doesn't happen, especially at this level. You're reaching the later stages against the favourites, and football is about coping with playing against a team that's performing better and not letting your heads drop. And ultimately, when England started ascending, Spain's heads dropped. So, if that wasn't Spain just fell off a cliff, that was England pushed them off. England's performance, England's character, and staying in the game, keeping up with it, keeping within one goal, whether it's because of keeping them to half chances or great saves that you think are going in. England kept in touch, kept their heads up, brought the power that they've got on from the bench, and that changed the game. That pushed the momentum in England's favour, and Spain couldn't cope. And that shows with the defence for the Stanway goal that it was a case of stay in touch when you're the second best team, and then make it count when you're the best team.
Can I just sorry, Steve, I know Steve's probably wants to say something as well, but just to jump on the back of what Andy said there, that's it. Like, when it got to the real nitty gritty, like when Spain scored, England didn't give up. And historically in the past, that probably could have happened with the mentality that we sort of have as a country as well with regards to football. They just kept going and they persevered. And it felt like the last sort of 10, when it got to the 80th minute, it was like Spain were like, oh, I can see the finish line now. We can see the finish line. We'll just sort of back off a little bit. And England just kept going. And then you saw, and again, I think a little bit of this is down to elite coach and an elite coaching staff, is that mentality. That's now ingrained in them, is that we keep going, we persevere, we stick to our game plan, we know what we need to do, we know how good we are. And Spain fell apart. I think Marty said it on Twitter and said it on here. They were like the banana skin. This was a banana skin game, wasn't it? Where it could have gone either way. And England came out on top. And that can only be a thing to build confidence. It doesn't matter how they won. They won under difficult circumstances.
I think that what was spoken about, that switch of momentum, it came for me actually with that Spain goal. So like you said, Spain, I think they kind of went to go defensive, and we've got for 1-0. We can play the possession game here. And England went, actually, we're going to step it up a gear. So you had Spain kind of like trying to slow it down and see the game through, and then England stepping up a gear. And the problem Spain have then, which you'll see a lot of football teams do when they try and do that, and then they do concede one goal, it's trying to get back to that higher pace that you were playing at originally. It's so hard. And England made them pay for it, and fair play to them.
TJ, can you remind me just as well, because I think you're on about the quote from Saturday's show. What was the analogy involved with spanners? I know there was spanners in there somewhere. I just can't remember what the analogy that was used in the comments. It might have been yourself actually to put it in. Yeah, no, it is all fair point. I think that's the thing, isn't it? And this was the first time England were properly tested. I think we all expected that to be against Norway, and I think Norway. We are going to do a show on this with Phil O'Connor, talk about Norway, because he's got some interesting insight for us into what happened with this Norway camp. But yeah, they were massively under par. So this was England's first real kind of test. And I actually agree with you, still. I think the momentum did change on the goal because, and I think you could, Charlie, I don't know whether you disagree with this. I think on TV it seemed like the crowd changed because before that, it was. For me personally, I've gone into this tournament thinking England have already won it. For me, I don't know why. I've just assumed that England are making it to the final. But up until as soon as Spain scored, everyone just kind of realised, oh, England could get knocked out here. Like, this could actually happen. Whereas I think before that, everyone was just like, oh, England will win. They'll get to the final. Big day out of Wembley. And that kind of went, oh, here we go. Right, this is a game now. I don't know whether you disagree with that, Charlie, or not.
I think you're right, which is mental that people were thinking just England will win. Because even in the quarterfinals, if you think about all 8 teams, like 6 of those teams could legitimately win it. Like, this has never been a foregone conclusion if you watch regularly and you don't just listen to what the front pages are telling you, which is, oh, England will win. But you're right. It's like I said, when that goal went in, it stopped being like a party atmosphere. And that was when all of a sudden the crowd were getting on the back of the referee. Because obviously you feel like the referee's giving everything to Spain. Oh, they're giving them everything. They've done 30 fouls and no one's had a yellow card. And the crowd were really buying into that with some encouragement from others, but they were buying into it and really getting on the backs of the Spanish players as well when they were taking too long to do things. And I think that probably helped England. Rather than it turn into this, oh, well, they're behind now, it just becomes a bit of an exhibition, a bit of a Mexican wave off. Like you're quite right, there was a bit of bite to it and a bit of an edge. Like, not horrible, but all of a sudden, oh, this is dead important. They could actually go out here. Because you're right, I think it's been getting to the point where, a bit like United playing Everton at Old Trafford, the women, it was becoming inconceivable that England wouldn't just win. Even though we know how good Spain are, how good Netherlands are, how good Sweden are, and Germany. So yeah, I think you're right. It felt in the stadium, it felt different, and that's why it felt like a proper. We've all been at them, haven't we? Like Conti Cup game away against Arsenal, that last 10 minutes when you just need something to happen. Marcus Rashford penalty against PSG. It felt like that, which for me is really important for the women's game going forward. It was brilliant, but that then made when Toone scored, that then made that relief incredible because everyone was in that together. It was like everyone had scored it with her.
Yeah, and it's like, just talking about the bite, it goes back to us. I can't remember which game it was. It was one of the other group games where I think I said to you, Charlie, when I saw you last week, that one of the commentators said, "Oh, this is starting to creep into the women's game. Players arguing with officials and that kind of thing." It's all, yeah, they're competitive. Like, what I don't know why is that a bad thing that competitive nature is coming into the game? Like, that's not a. So I think seeing that yesterday, I think that's why it made for, if you were a neutral watching that game, it made for a really good game of football because you had both teams. And to be fair to Spain, even after Stanway scored, I thought, right, that's it now. You know, this is just going to be seeing the game out. But it wasn't. Spain had a couple of chances. I know it didn't really threaten Mary Earps, but there was times you thought, I think it was about 90 seconds after Stanway's goal, Spain were back in England's box, passing it around. If they could have got the shot away, you're thinking that's 2-2 going to penalties. So it felt
was
like
one
a proper game.
Was it one where Bright made a brilliant block, I think? Like, got in front of Earpsy and made a really good block, kept them out. But yeah, good. It just made for it was better. It was better atmosphere, it being like that. And that, I think that's what will get people to come back. It's like I said, those emotional responses like this, that's what get you, like, you think you hate watching football. You're like, oh, this is horrible when you're watching it, but actually it's amazing because something brilliant could happen at any moment. And thankfully it did twice.
Just moving on slightly then, because I said we are going to try and wrap up in the last 10 minutes so everyone can get off to watch Germany-Austria. Andy, I'll come to you first on this one. What do you want to see from England in the next round then? Like I said, it's likely going to be Sweden. I'll put that on record and say it live because I'll be amazed if Belgium do beat Sweden, even with all the COVID case and everything else. So it's looking like an England-Sweden semi-final. What do you think England needs to do maybe differently? Is it more of the same going into that kind of game?
I think it's a funny one because we've talked about the same starting 11 every time, and we can question it, but as long as it works, why change? Now, we've talked about Rachel Daly struggled. Is that reason to change it up? Maybe put Greenwood at left back instead? Possibly. We can see that not much is happening with Ellen White up front. You know, she's done a lot for England and throughout her career, but something's just not happening with her up front. Whereas when Russo and Toone come on, and others, no other players are available, but when those two in particular have come on, it's made such a difference. And I'd love for them to get a start, but then I think if you start them and it's not working, then you think, right, do you bring Ellen White on for the last half hour and hope you get the same impact? And with Toone and Russo, with the age of those players, you can say to them, you've got 6, 7, 8 more of these tournaments in your career. You don't need to start this time. Go for the last half hour and prove to me why next tournament you're starting. You're in the first 11 every game. And they've got the hunger, they've got the talent. So I think, as much as I disagree with it as a general approach and probably wouldn't go with it myself, I think probably the same approach. Trust in your players, trust in the players you've got on the bench, because that's the difference. If you start the same 11 and not making subs till 75, 80 minutes, mentioning no names, but if you're only going to make late subs, then that's not a plan. That's just, these are my 11, this is all I've got. But making the subs that she's making are in time to have an impact and the right players to make an impact. So I think, even though it wouldn't necessarily be my approach, I would say, do it your way. It's working. It worked in the game that it maybe could have slipped up on. Carry on.
100%. And Sang, just very quickly, sorry, Steve. Don't let your bias lead your judgment. There's no bias here. They are the better players. Certainly on form at the moment. But I actually really agree with Andy's point, because this is something, it kind of contradicts that. But I agree with your point. If Russo and Toone are starting, are you bringing Ellen White off the bench? Is she going to have an impact that Russo can't do? I don't think so. So
No.
It maybe is better this way round. You know, these two, you know, and Chloe Kelly as well, actually. I think she was exceptional yesterday when she came on. I think that's another player that, you know, you're kind of looking at to bring on. So it's no surprise to me that it's the same subs pretty much at the same time. But like you said, Andy, if it's working, there's no point, specifically mid-tournament, unless, I think John said, unless there's big injuries, you know, Kira Walsh potentially. But, you know, it looks like that's okay. I wouldn't expect big changes.
It's just like a bit of a weird one. Like, I don't think she'll change it. But remember, was it 2017 when the Netherlands won? I think only like 13 players actually had minutes for Sarina. So it's like, this isn't new for her as the England coach. She's always been like this. Because we used to moan that like Jackie's playing every minute all the time, wants to have a rest, and she never did. I'd be interested. I think it'd be the same. I'd be interested to see if Russo, obviously Beth England's not had a minute. She's like the only one that's not had a minute, her and Lotta Woodman-Moore. So she's clearly not going to play. Is what difference it would have on Kirby's performance. Did she have a more mobile forward in front of her? Because she always comes off when Russo comes on. But obviously that's not the way they're going to do it. And I do also like kind of agree with this whole idea of you're playing England. It's like 60, 70 minutes in, you're tired, and you look over and they're bringing on Kelly, Russo and Toone. That's who they're bringing on. Rapid, creative, quick with the ball at their feet, ruthless. That could probably have like a bit of a psychological effect on who you're playing as well. But yeah, I wouldn't expect it to change anything. I would like to see Russo start just to see what that does for Kirby, because I think she's our genius. If you think about it, she's like our genius footballer that we've got. That's what they say, don't they? Men and women, we've got one genius footballer, and it's her. And we've not seen the best of her. And you look at her at Chelsea with Sam Kerr, who's so mobile and moves so well and holds up play and feeds the ball. She doesn't get that from Ellen White, and she perhaps would with Russo. But then you can't have Russo on without Toone. They're a package deal. I think they even said that on the commentary. I came back home and watched it. Oh, the best friends from Manchester United. So I don't know. I think same 11, stick to what's working. If it's not broke, why fix it?
And like Connor said earlier, you get that relationship at the club, and Fran's up there by herself, really, without, she hasn't actually got that partner. Whereas Toone and Russo come on, you can see they're working off of each other, they understand where to be. So yeah, it would be interesting with Leslie up front, see what Fran's like in there, but you're expecting the two of them to play together. I don't think they'll start. I think it's just going to be the same. And like you say, it's for high energy subs. It's working for England. I don't see much point in changing it.
Just throwing this back to you, Steve. Mark's talking now about Daly. Is that the only one, if you're looking at a change? Should Greenwood be coming in at fullback instead of Daly there?
Yeah, that's one we probably haven't actually given Greenwood any kind of credit so far, but she was actually decent when she came on, and you've got to admit she's got a wand of a left foot, so she gives you the set piece options as well, and especially if we're going to be looking at getting Leslie on, you want those crosses, those set pieces to be pinpoint to her, and she's going to provide that. So probably if there's going to be any change, that's going to be your first one.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And I agree with this comment as well. This is my big worry. Well, not a worry as such, because Russo will just be coming back to United going, right, add a 0 on the end of that contract. And it's up to United then to pay it. And if they don't, well,
pay it.
There'll be riots. Not literally. I'm not inciting riots at LSV. Do not throw that back. Do not throw that back to me. Right, I'm going to come around to each of you then for a little bit of a quick fire question before we round this off. Charlie, me and you were actually on that same show. I don't know whether Steve you were or not. I don't think you were. We said we were talking about whether a United player is going to be lifting the trophy. Now, obviously, we've only got 4 left, 3 of them in one side. Are you going to change your answer, or because me and you said Sweden are going to win it, so we said no. Are you going to change that answer, or
this is an emotional response? Yes, I'm going to change my answer. Toonie's going to lift it. Toonie.
Andy, to yourself. Was a United player going to, not just for England? Could Netherlands potentially pull off a shock and Jackie go all the way?
I think we know Netherlands are capable, but they've had COVID cases. So even when those players return, you're not necessarily at full fitness. England have got a bit of an advantage where we've got 2 days rest more than whoever we play in the semi-final. I think a lot of it, and I'm trying to stay away from the emotion of it, but I think England have got a real chance to go all the way.
I think I've kind of let slip. I'm expecting the England-Germany final at the start of the show. So, I think England are favourite after what we saw yesterday. Like I said, we were expecting to be good against Norway. We didn't get it, but yesterday was the first test, and they passed it and looked good doing it. So, I think favourites for them.
It's a fair point. And saying, to be fair, I'll be amazed if a Chelsea player doesn't, because I'm pretty sure Chelsea have got players all over the place. So I'll be amazed if a Chelsea player doesn't at least get to the final and go on to win it. And it's going to be a great game tomorrow night as well. I think Andy and Steve, you'll both go into that one. So I hope, obviously, you enjoy the Sweden show, hopefully tomorrow, albeit with a couple of cases in there as well. We'll be back tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Barry will be back, Fans Forum, because we've actually made another signing. United are really not helping the All United schedules when I'm putting the weekly schedules together. Obviously, Myla Tissier is announced, so that'll be doing a reaction to that at 7 o'clock tomorrow. I believe Marty, who was in the comments, is also on that one as well. And we'll be back again following that on next Monday as well, with stuff a little bit different. As the Euros draws to a close, we'll be looking back more towards United and things like that. And by then, to be fair, we might have signed somebody else, because United are just chucking out signings and loan deals. Carrie Jones has been loaned out. Zellum signed a new contract. United are just announcing everything at the moment. So we've got a lot of shows to cover. Andy, Steve, Charlie, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, well, depending which way you look at it, they will all be back when England are back at Wembley in the final, but we shall see. Make sure you like and subscribe on the channel. It's growing massively, which is amazing to see. Really helpful. If you like the video, and subscribe to the channel. And there's been a couple of new faces in the chat tonight as well. So thanks all for joining us. But for now, we'll see you guys very soon.